In the fog-choked village of St. Mary Mead, a cursed book, the Liber Umberium, whispers of doors to an ancient, hungry darkness. Miss Marple's sharp mind, Philip Marlowe's gritty resolve, and Holden Caulfield's haunted rebellion collide as they uncover a sinister force claiming lives. Shadows stalk them, voices tempt them, and the book demands a sacrifice to seal the door or unleash hell. Will they outwit the old ones or become their next prey? The clock's ticking, and the fog is closing in. The fog clung to the streets of St. Mary Mead like a shroud, thick and gray, muffling the world into a dreamlike hush. It was the kind of night where shadows seemed to breathe, where the air itself felt heavy with secrets. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window, her knitting needles clicking softly, a rhythm as steady as her heartbeat. Her cottage was warm, the fire crackling in the hearth, but her sharp eyes were fixed on the street outside, where the lamplight flickered like a dying star. Something was wrong. She could feel it, the way she always felt it. A disturbance in the ordinary, a ripple in the fabric of the village's quiet routine. St. Mary Mead was no stranger to secrets, but this was different. The air carried a chill that wasn't just the October frost. It was something older, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck prickle despite her years of composure. She'd heard the rumors, of course. Whispers in the post office, hushed voices at the Women's Institute. People had been seeing things, shapes in the fog, figures that vanished when you looked too long. A child had gone missing last week, little Tommy Grayson, only to be found wandering the woods 3 days later, mute and staring, his eyes like empty mirrors. The village doctor called it shock. Miss Marple wasn't so sure. Her needles paused mid-stitch as a shadow moved outside. Too tall, too angular to be one of the villagers. It lingered by the lamppost, its outline blurred but deliberate, as if it knew it was being watched. She set her knitting down, her hands steady despite the unease curling in her chest. "Well," she murmured to herself, "that's not Mr. Clements or young Dr. Haydock." She rose, smoothing her cardigan, and moved to the door. Curiosity, she often said, was a dangerous thing, but it was also her oldest friend. The street was silent as she stepped outside, her sensible shoes tapping softly on the cobblestones. The fog swallowed sound, swallowed light, but she could still make out the figure ahead. It was a man, tall and lean, wearing a trench coat that hung off his frame like it had seen too many rainy nights. He stood with his back to her, a cigarette glowing faintly in his hand, the smoke curling into the mist like a ghost's breath. "Excuse me," Miss Marple called, her voice clear and polite but firm, the kind of tone that made people listen, even in a fog like this. "Might I ask what brings you to St. Mary Mead at this hour?" The man turned slowly and the lamplight caught his face. Hard-edged, unshaven, with eyes that looked like they'd seen the bottom of too many bottles and too many bad nights. He took a drag on his cigarette, exhaling a plume that mingled with the fog. "Lady," he said, his voice low and rough. "I could ask you the same thing." Miss Marple smiled, undeterred. "I am Miss Jane Marple, and this is my village. You, however, are not familiar to me, Mr. Marlowe," he said, flicking ash into the street. "Philip Marlowe, and I'm here because someone paid me to be, though I'm starting to think they didn't tell me the half of it." "A private detective," Miss Marple said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "How very interesting. And what, pray tell, brings a man like you to a quiet place like this?" Marlowe's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Quiet? Lady, you've got a funny way of defining quiet. I got a call from a guy named Grayson. Said his kid went missing, came back wrong. Said this place has a problem, the kind that doesn't show up in police reports. He wired me a fat retainer to come poke around, so here I am. Poking." Miss Marple's expression didn't change, but her mind was racing. The Graysons, Tommy's parents. She'd visited them yesterday, seen the fear in their eyes, the way they flinched at every creak in their house. "You're here about Tommy," she said softly. "But there's more, isn't there? Something you're not saying." Marlowe studied her, his eyes sharp despite the weariness. You're not just some nosy old dame, are you? All right, I'll bite. Grayson mentioned something about a book. Old leather-bound, smells like it's been buried in a crypt. Said it showed up in the kids' room after he came back. Nobody knows where it came from. Nobody wants to touch it. You know anything about that? Miss Marple's breath caught, though she didn't let it show. A book. She'd heard whispers of it too. Not from the Graysons, but from old Mrs. Peake, who swore she'd seen a man in a black cloak carrying something heavy under his arm, slipping into the woods the night Tommy disappeared. She'd dismissed it as gossip, but now... I may know something, she said carefully, but I'd need to see this book for myself. And I'd need to know why you think it's important, Mr. Marlowe. Before Marlowe could answer, a scream tore through the fog, high and raw, like an animal caught in a trap. It came from the direction of the village square, where the old church stood, its steeple barely visible through the mist. Marlowe's hand went to his coat, pulling a revolver from an inside pocket. "Stay here," he said, already moving toward the sound. "Nonsense," Miss Marple said, picking up her pace to keep up with his long strides. "If there's trouble, I intend to know what it is." Marlowe shot her a look, half amused, half exasperated. "You're going to get yourself killed, lady." "Then we shall both be cautious," she replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. The square was deserted when they reached it, the fog thicker here, curling around the church's stone walls. Like fingers, the scream had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that felt louder than any sound. Marlowe's gun was steady in his hand, his eyes scanning the shadows. Miss Marple's gaze darted to the church door, slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling. "Out, someone's in there," she whispered. Marlowe nodded, moving toward the door. "Stay behind me." She didn't argue, but her mind was already piecing things together. The scream, the book, the fog that seemed to pulse with something unnatural. They stepped into the church, the air inside colder than the night outside, heavy with the smell of damp stone and something else, something metallic and wrong. The pews were empty, the altar untouched, but in the center of the aisle lay a figure, crumpled and still. Marlowe approached, his gun trained on the shadows, while Miss Marple knelt beside the body. It was a boy no older than 17, his face pale and his eyes wide open, staring at nothing. His lips were parted, as if he'd been trying to speak, but what caught Miss Marple's attention was the mark on his neck. A jagged symbol, like a claw, had scratched it into his skin. "Jesus," Marlowe muttered, crouching beside her. "That's no knife wound." "No," Miss Marple said, her voice steady but her heart pounding. "It's not." The boy's hand clutched something, a scrap of paper crumpled and stained with blood. Miss Marple gently pried it free, smoothing it out. It was a page torn from a book, the text in a language she didn't recognize, all sharp angles and loops that seemed to writhe on the page. At the bottom was a name scrawled in a shaky hand. "Holden." "Who's Holden?" Marlowe asked, reading over her shoulder. "I don't know," Miss Marple said, but her mind was already turning to the village's recent visitors. There had been a young man, sullen and out of place, seen wandering the lanes with a red hunting cap pulled low over his eyes. He'd kept to himself, but the villagers had noticed him, the way they noticed anything that didn't belong. Before she could say more, a noise came from the back of the church. A shuffle, then a low, guttural laugh that made the air feel heavier. Marlowe spun, his gun aimed at the darkness behind the altar. "Show yourself," he barked. The shadows moved, and a figure stepped into the dim light of the candles. He was young, maybe 16 or 17, with a lanky frame and a face that was all sharp angles and defiance. His red cap was tilted back, revealing eyes that were too bright, too wild, like he'd seen something he couldn't unsee. He was holding a book, old and leather-bound, its cover cracked and stained. "You're looking for me," he said, his voice unsteady but laced with a strange confidence. "Name's Holden. Holden Caulfield. And you're in way over your heads." "Miss." Marple stood, her eyes locked on the boy. "Mr. Caulfield," she said calmly, "what do you know about this book?" Holden laughed again, but it was a hollow sound, like he was trying to cover something up. "This book? It's not just a book. It's a door, and someone's been knocking from the other side. Marlowe lowered his gun slightly, but his grip didn't loosen. "Kid, you better start making sense or I'm gonna make you." Holden's eyes flicked to the body on the floor, and for a moment his bravado faltered. "You think I did that?" "I didn't, but I know what did. And it's not done yet." The fog outside seemed to press against the church windows, and Miss Marple felt that prickle again, sharper now. The book in Holden's hands seemed to hum, a faint vibration that she could feel in her bones. She glanced at Marlowe, then back at Holden, her mind racing through possibilities. 3 strangers, brought together by a village that wasn't what it seemed, by a book that shouldn't exist, by a horror that was only beginning to show itself. "Mr. Caulfield," she said, her voice cutting through the tension, "I think it's time you told us everything you know." Holden hesitated, his fingers tightening on the book. "You don't get it, do you? Once you know, you can't go back. This thing, it sees you, it knows you're looking." Marlowe stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Kid, I've seen plenty of things that don't play nice. Spill it, or we're gonna have a problem." Holden's gaze darted between them, then to the body, then to the book. Finally, he sighed, a sound that was half resignation, half fear. "All right. But don't say I didn't warn you." As he began to speak, the fog outside thickened, and the church seemed to grow darker. The candles flickering as if something was breathing on them. Miss Marple listened, her knitting needles forgotten, her mind sharp and focused. Marlowe stood ready, his gun still in hand. And Holden, the boy who didn't belong, clutched the book that wasn't a book, his words pulling them deeper into a nightmare that was only just beginning. The church's air grew colder as Holden Caulfield's words hung between them, each syllable seeming to tighten the grip of the fog outside. Miss Jane Marple stood motionless, her sharp eyes fixed on the boy, the leather-bound book in his hands radiating an unnatural weight. Philip Marlowe's revolver gleamed faintly in the candlelight, his jaw set, but even he seemed unsettled by the way the shadows clung to the edges of the room, thicker than they should be. The body of the boy in the aisle, still unidentified, his neck marred by that jagged claw-like mark, lay as a silent accusation, a puzzle piece in a game none of them fully understood. Holden's voice cracked as he spoke, his bravado fraying like a worn thread. "This book," he said, holding it up, its cover seeming to absorb the light rather than reflect it. "It's not just some old junk you find in a thrift shop. It's alive, in a way. It wants things, and it's been waiting for someone to open it." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind racing through decades of village gossip, half-remembered tales of things better left buried. "Mr. Caulfield," she said, her tone calm but unyielding, "you must be precise. What do you mean by 'it wants things', and how did you come to possess this book?" Holden shifted uncomfortably, his red hunting cap casting a shadow across his face. "I didn't want it. It found me. I was in New York, just wandering, trying to figure things out after I got kicked out of school again. I ended up in this creepy little bookstore in the village, the kind of place that smells like mold and desperation. The guy behind the counter, he had these weird, glassy eyes, handed it to me, said it was meant for me. I thought he was nuts, but I took it, didn't even pay. Next thing I know, I'm on a train to this nowhere village like the book was pulling me here." Marlowe snorted, but his eyes never left the book. "Kid, you sound like you've been hitting the cheap whiskey. Books don't pull people anywhere, don't they?" Miss Marple said softly, her gaze flicking to Marlowe. "I've known stranger things in St. Mary Mead. Go on, Mr. Caulfield." Holden swallowed, his fingers tightening on the book's edges. "Ever since I got it, things have been off. I see stuff in the corners of my eyes, shapes like people but not. And at night I hear whispering like someone's reading the book out loud, but I can't make out the words. Then I got to this place and it got worse. That kid," he nodded toward the body, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I saw him yesterday hanging around the woods. He was looking for something, muttering about finding the door. I think he read the book, too. Miss Marple knelt beside the body again, her fingers brushing the torn page still clutched in the boy's hand. The strange, angular script seemed to pulse under her touch, and for a moment she thought she heard a faint hum, like a distant swarm of insects. She stood quickly, her composure unshaken, but her heart racing. "This boy," she said. "I believe he's Tommy Grayson's cousin Peter. He was visiting the Graysons last week. I saw him at the market, quiet but restless. Not unlike you, Mr. Caulfield." Marlowe holstered his gun, his eyes narrowing. "So we've got a dead kid, a creepy book, and a village that's starting to feel like a bad dream. What's next? Miss Marple, you got a hunch about this?" She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hid 1,000 calculations. "I have several, Mr. Marlowe. But first we must return to the Graysons' home. If this book is connected to Tommy's disappearance and return, and now to poor Peter's death, then we need to know more about what happened in that house." Holden clutched the book tighter, his knuckles white. "You don't get it. If we go poking around, it'll know. It's watching us right now." Marlowe grabbed Holden's shoulder, not roughly but firmly. "Kid, if it's watching, I'd rather face it than stand here waiting for it to make the first move. Let's go." The fog seemed to part reluctantly as they left the church, the night air biting at their skin. St. Mary Mead's streets were empty, the cottages dark, as if the village itself was holding its breath. Miss Marple led the way, her steps brisk despite her age, her mind piecing together fragments of the puzzle. Marlowe walked beside her, his trench coat flapping in the wind, his eyes scanning every shadow. Holden trailed behind, the book tucked under his arm, muttering to himself about phonies and doors that shouldn't be opened. The Grayson house stood at the edge of the village, a squat, ivy-covered building that looked too ordinary to harbor secrets. But as they approached, Miss Marple noticed the windows, dark but not empty. Something moved behind the glass, a flicker of motion that was gone before she could be sure. She glanced at Marlowe, who nodded slightly, his hand resting on his gun. Mrs. Grayson opened the door before they could knock, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red from crying. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't expect—" "Who are these men?" "Friends," Miss Marple said smoothly. "This is Mr. Marlowe, a detective, and Mr. Caulfield, who may have information about recent events. May we come in?" Mrs. Grayson hesitated, her gaze darting to the book in Holden's hands. That's it," she whispered. "That's the book we found in Tommy's room." Holden froze, his eyes wide. "You didn't tell me it was in your kid's room." Mrs. Grayson's hands twisted together. "We didn't know what to do with it. After Tommy came back, he wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat. Just sat there staring at that book. Then Peter, he was curious, kept asking about it. He took it to his room last night, and now—" Her voice broke and she gestured toward the stairs. "He's gone, isn't he?" Miss Marple placed a gentle hand on her arm. "I'm afraid so, Mrs. Grayson. But we need to see Tommy's room, and the book if you still have it." Mrs. Grayson led them upstairs, her steps heavy, as if each one cost her something. The house was oppressively quiet, the kind of silence that felt like it was listening. Tommy's room was at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of dust and something sour, like spoiled milk. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled, and on the nightstand sat another copy of the book, identical to the one Holden carried, its leather cover cracked and stained. "Two of them," Marlowe muttered, his voice low. "This just keeps getting better." Holden shook his head, his voice barely audible. "It's not two books. It's the same book. It moves. It shows up where it wants to be." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she approached the nightstand, her fingers hovering over the book without touching it. "Mr. Caulfield, you said it's a door. A door to what exactly?" Holden's voice was a whisper now, his eyes fixed on the book as if it might leap at him. "To something old. something that's been waiting a long time. I don't know what it is, but it's hungry, and it's here, in this village. Before anyone could respond, a low moan came from the closet, a sound that was both human and not. Marlowe drew his gun, moving toward the door, while Miss Marple stepped back, her hand tightening on her handbag. Holden stayed rooted to the spot, his breath shallow. "Stay back," Marlowe said, his voice steady as he yanked the closet door open. Tommy Grayson sat inside, his knees drawn to his chest, his eyes blank and unseeing. His lips moved, muttering words that weren't English, weren't anything recognizable. The air around him seemed to shimmer, like heat rising from pavement, and the book on the nightstand pulsed, its cover twitching as if something inside was trying to get out. "Tommy," Miss Marple said softly, kneeling despite Marlowe's warning glance. "Can you hear me?" The boy's head snapped toward her, his eyes suddenly focused. But they weren't his eyes anymore. They were too dark, too deep, like wells that went down forever. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice layered with something older, something that made the room feel smaller. "It sees you now." Marlowe grabbed Tommy's arm, pulling him out of the closet, but the boy didn't resist. He just kept staring, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile. "It's already started," he said. "The door's open." The book on the nightstand fell to the floor, its pages flipping open on their own, revealing more of that writhing, angular script. The air grew heavier, and the shadows in the room stretched, reaching toward the book like fingers. Miss Marple stepped back, her mind racing through every old story she'd ever heard, tales of curses, of things buried in the woods, of doors that should never be opened. "We need to leave this room," she said, her voice cutting through the growing hum that filled the air. Now, Marlowe didn't argue, dragging Tommy toward the door. Holden grabbed the book from the floor, clutching both copies now, his face pale. "It won't let us go," he whispered. "It never does." As they stumbled into the hall, the house seemed to groan, the walls creaking as if they were alive. Mrs. Grayson screamed, pointing toward the stairs, where a figure stood in the shadows. A tall, cloaked shape, its face hidden, its hands holding another copy of the book. The figure didn't move, but its presence was a weight, a promise of something coming. Miss Marple's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Marlowe, Mr. Caulfield, we must stay together. Whatever this is, it wants us to run. We must not give it the satisfaction." Marlowe's gun was trained on the figure, but his voice was tight. "Lady, I'm starting to think you're the only one keeping us alive right now." Holden's eyes were wild, his voice shaking. "It's not just one thing, it's all of them. The books, the fog, the village, it's all part of it." The figure at the bottom of the stairs began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the house. And the fog outside pressed against the windows, seeping through the cracks like smoke. Miss Marple clutched her handbag tighter, her mind racing. 3 strangers, a cursed book, a village that wasn't what it seemed, and a horror that was growing stronger with every moment they stayed. The fog in St. Mary Mead lingered like a shroud as Miss Marple, Philip Marlowe, and Holden Caulfield boarded a train for London, their journey destined to end across the Atlantic in Los Angeles. The decision to leave had been made in haste, spurred by a chilling discovery within the cursed book that had already claimed lives in the quiet village. Tucked into its binding was a yellowed envelope containing a single sheet of paper, written in elegant, looping handwriting. "To understand the door, seek the key in the City of Angels. Ask for Mr. Noir at the Midnight Lounge." Below the message, a date, October 31st, 1947. The ink gleamed as if freshly penned, despite the years it marked, and the trio knew they could no longer stay where they were. Their journey was a blur of tense silence, train to London, plane to Los Angeles, each mile stretching the thread of dread tighter. When they landed at Los Angeles International Airport, the sky hung heavy with clouds that withheld rain, casting a gray pall over the city. The air was thick with exhaust and a faint tang of ocean salt. a stark contrast to the damp stillness of St. Mary Mead. Los Angeles unfurled before them, a sprawling tapestry of light and shadow, where glamour masked a lurking menace. Marlowe took the lead, his steps sure despite the unfamiliar company he kept. "We need to find the Midnight Lounge," he said, flagging down a taxi with the ease of a man who knew these streets. "If it exists, someone's heard of it." The cab wove through the city, depositing them in a neglected corner where a flickering neon sign spelled out Midnight Lounge above a weathered door. The building looked abandoned, its windows dark, but Marlowe pushed the door open without hesitation. A narrow staircase descended into the earth, the air cooling as they went. Jazz. Music rose to meet them, slow and mournful, mingling with the murmur of voices. At the bottom, a heavy curtain barred their way. Marlowe parted it, revealing a scene that seemed plucked from another era. The lounge glowed dimly with the flicker of candles and low lamps, red velvet booths lining the walls. A small stage hosted a jazz band, their melody haunting, while patrons, in sharp suits and elegant gowns, filled the space. Yet something was wrong. Their eyes glinted too brightly, their smiles stretched too thin, as if they were actors in a play gone subtly awry. A hostess approached, her demeanor polished but icy. "Welcome to the Midnight Lounge. Do you have a reservation?" "We're here to see Mr. Noir," Marlowe said, his tone clipped. Her smile wavered. "Mr. Noir doesn't see just anyone. Who's asking?" "Tell him it's about the book," Miss Marple interjected, her voice carrying the quiet authority of a woman accustomed to being heard. The hostess nodded, vanishing behind a curtained doorway. The trio waited, the music swelling, the air growing dense. She returned moments later. "Follow me. Mr. Noir will see you." They were led through the lounge to a private room, its door a slab of dark wood etched with carvings that seemed to shift in the dim light. Inside, antique furniture clashed with walls of ancient books, and behind a massive desk sat a man cloaked in shadow. "Please sit," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "I've been expecting you." They sat, exchanging wary glances. Miss Marple spoke first. "You know about the book." The man leaned forward, revealing a face both striking and worn. Silver hair, piercing blue eyes. A man in his 50s who carried time like a burden. "I do. You hold a copy of the Liber Umberium, the Book of Shadows. It's a perilous thing. A key to doors that should remain locked." Holden clutched the two books tighter. "A copy? You mean there's more than one?" "Each is unique," Mr. Noir said, his gaze lingering on the books. "The Liber Umberium binds itself to an owner, feeding on their fears and desires, granting power at a steep price." "And that price?" Miss Marple pressed. "Their humanity," he replied, his voice soft but heavy. "It twists them, makes them vessels for entities from beyond the door." Marlowe's jaw tightened. "Entities responsible for the deaths in St. Mary Mead?" "Yes," Mr. Noir confirmed. "When the book is opened, it lets them in. They thrive on fear, despair. Places like your village are feast for them." "How do we stop them?" Holden asked, his voice edged with desperation. Mr. Noir rose, retrieving a scroll from a shelf. He unrolled it on the desk, a map, weathered and marked with a location in the desert beyond Los Angeles. "This is where the first Liber Umberium was forged. Find the original book there, perform a ritual to seal the door, and the incursions stop." Miss Marple studied the map. "What does this ritual require?" His expression darkened. "The sacrifice of the book's owners. The entities are tied to their souls. Those souls must be offered to close the door." Holden's face drained of color. "You're saying we have to die?" "It's the only way," Mr. Noir said. "The alternative is a spreading horror." Marlowe leaned forward, eyes hard. "I don't buy it. There's always another play." "The lore is absolute," Mr. Noir countered. Miss Marple's fingers tapped a rhythm on her knee. "How do you know all this, Mr. Noir?" He paused, then sighed, rolling up his sleeve to reveal a scarred arm, the jagged symbol from St. Mary, Mead etched into his flesh. "I owned a copy once. I studied it. sought its secrets until I saw the danger. I couldn't destroy it, only seal it away. But it marked me, and the entities hunt me still. This lounge, the music, the life here, it keeps them at bay. So you're a prisoner, Holden said. Of sorts, Mr. Noir admitted. I can't leave, but I can help you. Take the map. You'll need a silver dagger blessed by a priest, holy water, and a lock of hair from each owner. Holden frowned at the 2 books. I've got 2. Does that mean I'm tied to both? Yes, Mr. Noir said, his eyes narrowing. The other owner is someone you've met or will. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Peter Grayson, the boy from the church. Peter had a page from the book. Could it be him? Possibly, Mr. Noir said. If he touched it, it may have claimed him. He's dead, Marlowe pointed out. Death strengthens the bond, Mr. Noir replied. The entities can use him as a conduit. You'll need something of his for the ritual. Hair, perhaps. Miss Marple nodded. Then we proceed. We've no time to lose. Mr. Noir handed them the map. The site's an old mission in the desert. Beware. The entities will fight to keep the door open. They left the lounge, the night air sharp against their skin. The city loomed, its shadows alive with threat. They checked into a hotel nearby, splitting into separate rooms, but sleep was a distant hope. Miss Marple sat by her window, knitting to steady her nerves, when a scratching began at the door, slow, deliberate like claws on wood. "Who's there?" she called, rising. No answer, only louder scratching. She cracked the door open. The hall was empty, but a whiff of decay slipped through. She locked it, heart racing, and then a whisper came. "Jane, come to me." It was Raymond, her dead nephew, his voice a cruel echo. "Open the door, Jane. You're not real," she said, backing away, laughter dry and brittle. "I'm real, Aunt Jane." The door shuddered, then stilled. She didn't sleep. Marlowe lay with his gun close, the room silent until footsteps circled his bed. "Who's there?" he snapped, aiming into the dark. A voice answered. "You can't shoot me, Marlowe, I'm dead." Johnny, his old partner, flickered into view, translucent. "The book can bring you back, Phil." Marlowe fired, bullets piercing the wall. Johnny laughed and faded. Marlowe sweated through the night. Holden dreamed of Central Park, twisted and fog-choked, where pale figures chanted with glowing eyes. A girl smiled too wide. "Join us, Holden. Open the door." He woke screaming, the books pulsing faintly beside him. Morning found them in the lobby, hollow-eyed but resolute. They shared their night's terrors, agreeing the entities were closing. In first they sought a church. Father O'Malley, an elderly priest, met their request for a blessed dagger and holy water with suspicion. "What's this for?" he asked. "Protection," Marlowe said. "Something unholy," Miss Marple explained, and O'Malley relented, blessing a silver dagger and handing over a vial of holy water. "Be wary," he cautioned. "These forces deceive." They rented a car and drove into the desert, the city giving way to barren wastes. "Feels like a trap," Marlowe muttered. "We must act," Miss Marple said. "I just want it done," Holden added, clutching the books. The mission loomed ahead, a crumbling adobe ruin. Inside, an altar bore familiar symbols. They set the books down, but whispers filled the air and the symbols glowed blue. Ghostly figures emerged, eyes agleam. Miss Marple splashed holy water, driving them back, while she read the incantation from the scroll. The altar split, a void yawning beneath, pulling the entities in. It tugged at them too, but she finished the chant, sealing it shut. The books lay blank. "Did it work?" Holden asked. "I think so," Miss Marple said. "Let's go," Marlowe urged. As they drove back, the radio crackled. "The door's still open. More books, more doors. Find them, or it continues." "Our work's not done," Miss Marple said. "We'll fight," Marlowe vowed. "Whatever it takes," Holden echoed. The city lights beckoned, shadows within them stirring, the battle far from over. Drift, New York was a monster sprawled across the earth, its jagged skyline a row of teeth biting into the gray sky. Holden Caulfield trudged through its streets, his red hunting cap pulled low, his hands buried in his coat pockets. The city buzzed around him, cabs blaring, vendors shouting, the air heavy with the stink of gasoline and rotting trash. But beneath the noise, something else slithered, something that had trailed him from St. Mary Mead in Los Angeles, something he couldn't shake. He'd ditched Miss Marple and Marlowe back in LA, mumbling some excuse about needing to figure things out. Truth was, he was running from the dead boy in the church, from the book that pulsed like a living thing, from the whispers that scratched at his mind. The Liber Umberium sat heavy in his bag, a silent threat he couldn't bring himself to ditch. He hadn't touched it since that night in the desert, but he felt it always like a cold hand on his neck. He thought New York would swallow him up, let him fade into its chaos. But the city felt wrong now. The crowds moved like puppets, their eyes glinting too sharp, their grins too wide. He kept walking, aimless, the pavement stretching out like a treadmill to nowhere. An alley caught his eye, narrow, dark, the buildings leaning in like they were holding a secret. He stepped inside, the city's roar fading to a dull hum. His footsteps echoed too loud in the stillness. Then he saw it, a figure at the far end, cloaked in shadow, motionless. Holden froze, his pulse hammering. "Who's there?" he croaked, his hand twitching toward his bag. No answer. Just that figure, watching. He backed up, but the alley warped, the exit slipping away like a mirage. His breath hitched, panic rising. He blinked and the figure vanished. The alley snapped back, normal again, the city's noise crashing over him like a wave. He stumbled onto the street, clutching a lamppost, gulping air. "You're cracking up, Caulfield," he muttered. But he wasn't. He knew it. The book had marked him, and whatever it had unleashed wasn't done playing. Central Park was a skeleton of itself, the trees bare, the paths deserted. Holden slumped onto a bench, the book in his bag, a lead weight beside him. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just drifted. His mind wandered back to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple's steady voice cutting through the chaos, her hands tracing symbols in the dirt. "We must stay together," she'd said. And Marlowe, cool as ever, lighting a cigarette. "There's always another play." He'd left them behind, though. Run back to New York, to the one place he thought he could hide. Fat chance. A shadow loomed over him. He looked up, heart lurching. A man stood there, tall, thin, fedora shadowing his face, coat flapping in the wind. Black gloves hid his hands, but his voice slid out, smooth and cold. "You're Holden Caulfield." Holden gripped his bag. "Who's asking?" The man's lips twitched into a smile, thin and sharp. "A friend or an enemy. Your call." "I don't need friends," Holden shot back. "And I've got enemies to spare." A low chuckle like ice cracking. "Smart kid. That's why the book picked you." Holden's stomach dropped. "You know about it?" "I know plenty," the man said, stepping closer. "I know you're running from it, but it's got you hooked. I know it's in that bag right now, and I know others are hunting it." Holden stood, clutching the bag tighter. "What do you want?" "To help you," the man said, his smile widening, teeth gleaming unnaturally. "To show you how to use it. You don't have to fear it, Holden. You can bend it to your will." "I don't want it," Holden snapped. "I want it gone." The man's eyes darkened, his smile fading. "Big mistake, kid. That book's older than this city, older than us. It's a key to something vast. You can't destroy it." "I've seen what it does," Holden said, voice trembling. "The bodies, the shadows, the things it lets in. I'm not opening that door." The man sighed, a sound that chilled Holden's bones. "You're small-time, Caulfield. It could give you everything. Power, wealth, anything. Just turn the key." "No," Holden said, stepping back. "I won't." The man's face hardened, his eyes glinting like steel. "Then you're dead weight, and dead weight gets cut loose. He turned and melted into the park, leaving Holden shaking, the air thick with menace. That guy wasn't human. Not fully. Holden could feel it. Night found him in a dive hotel, the room reeking of smoke and despair. He locked the door, dumped the book on the bed, and stared at it. The Liber Umberium looked harmless. Just old leather and faded pages. But he knew better. He hadn't told Marple or Marlowe about the second copy, the one from Tommy Grayson's room. He didn't know why he'd kept it a secret, just that it felt like his burden to carry. Now it sat there, taunting him. The silence broke. Whispers crept in, soft at first, then louder, a chorus of voices overlapping in his skull. "Open the door, Holden. Let us in." He pressed his hands to his ears, but they were inside him. "No," he rasped. "Leave me alone. You're ours already." "Open it." The book glowed, a sickly light pulsing like a heartbeat. His hand moved toward it, trembling, drawn by some sick pull. The voices screamed now, and he felt it, a hunger, ancient and endless, reaching for him. He yanked his hand back, scrambling off the bed. The glow dimmed, the voices faded, but the room felt alive, waiting. He couldn't stay here, he needed them, Marple, Marlowe, he needed help. He found a payphone, coins clattering as he dialed Miss Marple's number. Her voice cut through the static, calm as ever. "Mr. Caulfield?" "Yeah," he said, throat raw. "Something's happening. I need you." "Tell me," she said. He spilled it all. The man, the whispers, the glowing book. Silence followed, heavy and long. "Be careful," she said finally, her tone grim. "The entities are gaining strength, using the book to get to you. Don't open it no matter what." "I know," he said, choking up. "But it's like it's in me." "You're stronger than that," she replied. "We're coming to New York, Mr. Marlowe and I. We'll be there by morning. Stay in public, around people. They won't strike where there are eyes." "Okay," he managed. "I'll try." "And Holden," she added, softer now, "you're not alone. We're in this together. We need you." He nodded into the phone, her words a lifeline. "I won't let you down." He holed up in a diner, coffee going cold as he watched the night through grimy glass. Shadows danced in the neon glow, and sometimes he swore he saw the man across the street staring. But when he looked again, nothing. Dawn broke, weak and pale. Miss Marple and Marlowe were coming. They'd fix this somehow. But the book still whispered, faint and patient, and deep down, Holden knew the door was still cracked open, waiting for him to slip. The interrogation room was a cold, gray box, its single fluorescent light buzzing faintly overhead. Detective Sarah Blake sat across from the suspect, a wiry man named Daniel Holt, his arms crossed and a smirk tugging at his lips. She slid a grainy photograph across the scratched metal table, a security camera still showing a figure walking away from the victim's house, time-stamped just after the murder. "You were there that night," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "This doesn't lie." Holt's smirk faltered for a split second before he leaned back, feigning nonchalance. "I've got an alibi, Detective. I was with friends. Check it." "We did," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing. "Your friends change their story every time we ask. This photo puts you at the scene. Explain that." He shifted in his seat, the bravado slipping. "All right, fine. I was in the area. But I didn't kill anyone. I was meeting someone, a contact from the mayor's office. They had info on corruption in the city, but they never showed." Sarah's pulse quickened. "The mayor's office? Who?" Holt hesitated, then muttered, "Lisa Monroe, a staffer. She said she had proof, documents that could ruin people. I waited. She didn't come, so I left. That's it." "Lisa Monroe," Sarah repeated, filing the name away. If Holt was telling the truth, this murder might be tied to something bigger. "I'll verify your story. If it checks out, you might walk, for now." As she stepped into the hall, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll be next." Her stomach twisted. Someone was watching. Needing perspective, Sarah drove to the home of her mentor, Retired Detective Jack Thompson. His cabin smelled of coffee and old books. She explained the case over a steaming mug. "You're poking a bear, Sarah," Jack said, his gravelly voice laced with concern. "If the mayor's office is involved, you're up against power, not just a killer." "I can't stop now," she said. "There's a murderer out there, and maybe more." Jack sighed. "You're stubborn as ever. Just watch your back. Call me if it gets hairy." Back at the station, a colleague dropped a forensics report on her desk. "You'll want to see this." Sarah opened it. The fingerprints on the murder weapon didn't match Holt. They belonged to Victor Slade, a hitman who'd vanished years ago, a professional killer. Her mind raced. This wasn't a random crime. It was a contract hit. Leaving the station that night, Sarah spotted a black sedan idling across the street. Too long to be coincidence. She climbed into her car, watching her rearview mirror. The sedan followed. Her heart thudded as she wove through traffic, taking sharp turns to shake it. The car stayed close, relentless. Desperate, she veered into a busy parking lot, hiding among other vehicles. The sedan passed, then vanished into the night. Sarah exhaled shakily. Someone wanted her off this case. Badly. But she wasn't backing down. The cab ride out of New York was a tense, silent affair. The city's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, but the weight of its watchful eyes lingered. Holden clutched the bag with the 2 copies of the Liber Umberium, their faint thrumming a constant reminder of the trouble they were in. Miss Marple sat beside him, her knitting needles clicking a steady rhythm, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Holden's mind. Philip Marlowe slouched in the front seat, lighting one cigarette after another, the smoke curling out the cracked window into the cold autumn air. They were headed to Connecticut, to the home of Miss Marple's old friend, Professor Archibald Wren, a retired occult scholar who might hold the key to understanding the book's power. The plan was simple: get answers, arm themselves with knowledge, and figure out how to survive the return to St. Mary Mead. But nothing about this felt simple. "You sure this guy's legit?" Marlowe asked, flicking ash onto the cab floor. "I've seen my share of con artists peddling spooky nonsense." Miss Marple's lips quirked into a small smile. "Oh, Archibald is quite genuine, Mr. Marlowe. Eccentric, perhaps, but he spent his life studying things most people refuse to acknowledge. If anyone can shed light on the Liber Umberium, it's him." Holden shifted uncomfortably. What if he can't? What if we're just wasting time while those things get stronger? "Then we're no worse off than we are now," Marlowe said, his voice gruff but steady. "But sitting around waiting for the axe to fall isn't my style. We've got a lead. Let's chase it." The cab dropped them off at a winding dirt road leading to a sprawling, ivy-covered estate. The house loomed ahead, its gabled roof and dark windows giving it the look of a place forgotten by time. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and something sour, like decay just out of sight. Holden's stomach twisted as they approached the door, the books in his bag pulsing faintly, as if sensing something nearby. Marlowe knocked, the sound echoing through the stillness. After a long pause, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, gaunt man with wild white hair and eyes that gleamed with a mix of curiosity and wariness. He wore a threadbare tweed suit, and his hands were stained with ink. "Jane Marple," he said, his voice a low rasp. "I'd say this is a pleasant surprise, but your expression tells me otherwise. What's happened?" "Archibald," Miss Marple replied, stepping forward with a nod. "We're in rather a bind. May we come in?" The professor ushered them into a cluttered parlor, its walls lined with bookshelves and strange artifacts. Carved, stones, rusted daggers, a skull with runes etched into its brow. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced across the room. Holden's gaze darted around, half expecting the shadows to move on their own. "Sit," Wren said, gesturing to a sagging sofa, "and tell me everything." Miss Marple recounted the tale, the odd deaths in St. Mary Mead, Marlowe's grisly case in Los Angeles, Holden's encounter in New York, and the sinister bookstore owner's cryptic warnings. She spoke of the Liber Umberium, its power to open doors to an ancient evil, and the chilling revelation that one of them might have to sacrifice themselves to stop it. Wren listened intently, his fingers steepled, his face growing graver with each word. When she finished, he leaned back, exhaling sharply. The Liber Umberium. I'd hoped never to hear that name again. Marlowe's eyes narrowed. You know it? Too well, Wren said. He rose and crossed to a shelf, pulling down a leather-bound journal yellowed with age. It's an old legend, even among occult circles. The Book of Shadows, written in a tongue older than Latin, bound in human skin. It's said to be a fragment of something greater, a text created by a cult that worshipped entities beyond our world. Holden swallowed hard. The old ones. Wren nodded. That's one name for them. They're not gods, not demons, just other. Beings from a plane that intersects ours only when the barriers weaken. The Liber Umberium is a key to those barriers, a tool to let them through. Marlowe stubbed out his cigarette on the armrest, ignoring Wren's frown. So how do we lock the door? The creep in the bookstore said we need the original book hidden in St. Mary Mead. He's right, Wren said, flipping open the journal to a page filled with jagged sketches, symbols that matched those on the book's cover. The first Liber Umberium was created there centuries ago by a priest named Elias Crow. He made a pact with the old ones, offering his village as a gateway in exchange for power. The ritual went wrong, and the village was nearly destroyed. Crow's book was buried with him, sealed with a blood curse to keep the door shut. Miss Marple's knitting paused. But it's opening again, why now? Wren's expression darkened. The curse is weakening. Each new copy of the book, like the ones you carry, spreads the infection, thinning the barrier. Someone's been making them, distributing them to chosen vessels. He glanced at Holden. You were meant to open it, to widen the breach. Holden's hands tightened on the bag. I didn't, I won't. Good, Wren said. That might buy us time, but the original book is the only way to reinforce the seal. You'll need to find Crow's grave, retrieve it, and perform the counter-ritual. Marlowe leaned forward. And the catch? There's always a catch. Wren hesitated, his eyes flickering to the fire. The ritual requires a sacrifice, just as you were told. One life to bind the book, to take Crow's place as the guardian. It's not death exactly. More like a liminal existence holding the door shut from the other side. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Holden's voice broke it, small and shaky. So one of us has to... what? Become a ghost? Something like that, Wren said. But there may be another way. I've studied Crow's notes. There's a chance the ritual can be altered using the books you have as a substitute. It's risky, untested, but it might spare you. Might, Marlowe echoed, his tone dry. Great odds. It's better than nothing, Miss Marple said firmly. Archibald, can you help us prepare? We'll need to know the ritual, the symbols, everything. Wren nodded. I'll give you what I have, but be warned. St. Mary Mead won't be the quaint village you remember, Jane. The old ones have taken root there. You'll face things that defy reason. We've already seen plenty of that, Marlowe muttered, lighting another cigarette. What's a little more? Hours later, armed with Wren's journal, a map to Crow's grave, and a hastily scribbled list of ritual components, the trio stood outside the estate, the sky darkening with storm clouds. The books in Holden's bag pulsed stronger now, a steady heartbeat that set his teeth on edge. We're walking into a nightmare, he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. Miss Marple placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. Perhaps, Mr. Caulfield, but we're doing it together. That counts for something. Marlowe exhaled a plume of smoke, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Let's hope it's enough. Next stop, St. Mary Mead. And whatever's waiting for us, as they boarded a train back to the coast. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and the air carried a faint guttural whisper that wasn't the wind. The Liber Umberium knew they were coming, and it was ready. The train to St. Mary Mead rattled through the English countryside, its rhythm a grim counterpoint to the tension in the carriage. Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her knitting needles moving with mechanical precision, though her eyes were fixed on the fog-shrouded fields beyond. The Liber Umberium sat in Holden Caulfield's bag, its 2 copies unnervingly silent since their encounter in Connecticut with Professor Wren. Philip Marlowe slouched across from her, his cigarette smoke curling toward the ceiling, his jaw tight with the weight of what they'd learned. The original book, buried with the cursed priest Elias Crow, was their only hope to seal the door to the old ones. But the cost, a sacrifice of one of their lives, loomed like a guillotine. Holden broke the silence, his voice raw. "This is nuts. We're walking back into that village knowing it's crawling with whatever those things are, and one of us has to play martyr." Miss Marple's needles paused. "Mr. Caulfield, we've no choice but to face this. Running, as you've learned, only delays the inevitable. Professor Wren's alternative ritual may spare us, but we must be prepared for anything." Marlowe exhaled a plume of smoke. "She's right, kid. You saw what happened in New York. Those shadows aren't giving up. We either shut this down in St. Mary Mead or it spreads. I've seen enough bad deals to know you don't walk away from one like this." Holden's hands tightened on the bag, his red cap casting a shadow over his pale face. I keep hearing it. The book. It's quiet now, but it's waiting. Like it knows we're coming." Miss Marple's gaze softened, though her voice remained firm. "Then we must be cleverer than it is. We have the ritual, the map to Crow's grave, and each other. That's no small thing." The train lurched to a stop, and the platform sign read, "St. Mary Mead." The village looked deceptively serene, its cottages nestled under a sky bruised with storm clouds, but the air was wrong. Too still, too heavy, like the world was holding its breath. As they stepped onto the platform, the fog rolled in, thicker than before, curling around their ankles like tendrils. Miss Marple led them to her cottage, insisting on tea before they ventured to the churchyard where Crow's grave lay. "We'll need our wits about us," she said, setting out her best china. The familiar ritual of pouring tea steadied her, though the shadows outside her windows seemed to press closer, watching. Marlowe sipped his tea, grimacing at its delicacy. "You sure about this, Miss Marple? This village feels like it's waiting to swallow us whole." "I've lived here all my life," she replied, stirring her cup. "St. Mary Mead has its secrets, but it's still my home. We'll find the grave, perform the ritual, and put this right." Holden stared into his tea untouched. "What if Wren's wrong? What if his alternative doesn't work, and one of us has to?" He trailed off, unable to say it. "Then we face that choice when it comes," Miss Marple said gently. "But I've found that knowledge and courage can change even the darkest paths." Marlowe set his cup down, his eyes scanning the room. "Speaking of knowledge, we need to talk about those books. Holden, you've got 2. That's 2 owners, right? You and who else?" Holden's jaw tightened. "I don't know. Maybe Tommy Grayson or Peter, the kid from the church. He had a page from it." Miss Marple frowned. "Peter's dead, but Professor Wren said death strengthens the bond. We'll need something of his for the ritual, a lock of hair perhaps. Mrs. Grayson may have kept something." Marlowe lit another cigarette. "And if it's not Peter? If there's another player out there pulling strings?" "Then we ask tough questions," Miss Marple said, "starting with Mrs. Grayson. She knows more than she's let on." The Grayson house was a shadow of its former warmth, its windows, dark, the ivy seeming to choke the walls. Mrs. Grayson answered the door, her face gaunt, her eyes darting nervously. "Miss Marple, I didn't expect you back so soon." "We need to speak, Mrs. Grayson," Miss Marple said, her tone polite but unyielding. "About Tommy, Peter, and the book." Mrs. Grayson's hands twisted together. "I've told you everything. The book appeared in Tommy's room after he came back. Peter took it, and now he's—" Her voice broke. Marlowe stepped forward, his presence imposing. "We're not here to dance around it, ma'am. We need something of Peter's, hair, a belonging, and we need the truth about how that book got here." She hesitated, then led them inside. The air was thick with the smell of damp and something metallic, like blood faintly lingering. In the parlor, Tommy sat on the sofa, his eyes vacant, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't acknowledge them, but the air around him shimmered, faintly, like heat rising from pavement. Miss Marple knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Tommy, can you hear me?" His head turned slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. Too dark, too deep, like the void in the desert mission. "You're too late," he whispered, his voice layered with something ancient. The doors open wider now. Holden flinched, clutching his bag. "He's not Tommy anymore, is he?" Mrs. Grayson sobbed. "He hasn't been himself since he came back. He just sits there muttering. And the book, it keeps showing up no matter where I hide it." Marlowe's eyes narrowed. "Where is it now?" She pointed to a drawer in the sideboard. Marlowe opened it, revealing another Liber Umberium, identical to the ones Holden carried. "3 books," he muttered. "This just keeps getting better." Miss Marple stood, her mind racing. "Mrs. Grayson, do you have anything of Peter's? A keepsake?" She nodded, disappearing upstairs and returning with a small lock of hair, tied with a ribbon. "From his brush," she said, her voice trembling. "Will it help?" "It might," Miss Marple said, tucking it into her handbag. "We'll do everything we can." As they turned to leave, Tommy's voice stopped them, low and guttural. "You can't close it. The old ones are awake. They see you." The room grew colder, the shadows stretching unnaturally. Holden's bag pulsed, the books inside humming. Marlowe drew his gun, but Miss Marple raised a hand. "Not yet, Mr. Marlowe. We need to reach the grave." The churchyard was a maze of weathered stones, the fog so thick it swallowed the world, beyond a few feet. Crow's grave, according to Wren's map, lay beneath an ancient yew tree. They found it, a slab of cracked granite, the name Elias Crow barely legible, the same jagged symbol from the book etched into its surface. Marlowe knelt, brushing dirt from the stone. "This is it. Let's dig." Holden hesitated, his breath shallow. "What if it's a trap? What if the book wants us here?" "Then we spring it," Marlowe said, already prying at the earth with a shovel from the church shed. "Stay sharp." As they dug, the fog seemed to pulse, whispers rising from the ground. Not words, but a chorus of hunger, ancient and endless. The books in Holden's bag glowed faintly, their covers twitching. Miss Marple clutched the lock of Peter's hair, her lips moving in a silent prayer. The shovel hit wood, a coffin, rotted but intact. Marlowe pried it open, revealing a skeleton clutching a 4th Liber Umberium, its cover pristine despite centuries underground. The air grew heavy, the whispers deafening. "Get the ritual ready," Marlowe said, his voice tight. Miss Marple spread Wren's notes on the ground, arranging the books, the hair, and the silver dagger from Los Angeles. But as she began the incantation, the ground shook and a figure emerged from the fog, a tall, cloaked shape, its face hidden, holding yet another copy of the book. "You're too late," it said, its voice a chorus of 1,000 throats. "The door is open." The churchyard in St. Mary Mead was a frozen tableau, the fog so dense it seemed to breathe. The cloaked figure stood before Miss Marple, Philip Marlowe, and Holden Caulfield, its silhouette wavering, like smoke, the Liber Umberium in its hands pulsing with a sickly green light. The air thrummed with whispers, ancient, hungry voices that clawed at the edges of their minds. Elias Crow's open grave gaped behind them, the skeleton's book, gleaming in the coffin, its cover identical to the ones Holden clutched in his bag. The ground trembled faintly, as if the earth itself recoiled from what was coming. Miss Marple's voice cut through the haze, steady despite the chill in her bones. "Who are you?" she demanded, clutching Professor Wren's notes and the lock of Peter Grayson's hair. "And what do you want with us?" The figure's laugh was a low, guttural rasp, like gravel dragged across bone. "Want? I am merely a herald. The old ones stir, and you hold their keys." Its hidden face seemed to shift, a flicker of something not human beneath the hood. Give me the books, and you may yet live. Marlowe's revolver was already drawn, its barrel steady. Not a chance, pal. You want 'em, you'll have to go through me. Holden's hands shook, the bag with the 2 Liber Umberium copies feeling heavier than ever. This is crazy, he muttered. We're standing over a dead guy's grave arguing with what even is that thing? Focus, Mr. Caulfield, Miss Marple said sharply, her eyes never leaving the figure. We have the ritual. We can still close the door, but we must act quickly. The figure tilted its head, as if amused. The ritual? You think your scribbled words and trinkets can stop what's begun? The door's open and the old ones are ravenous. Give me the books or St. Mary Mead becomes their feast. Marlowe stepped forward, his cigarette glowing faintly in the fog. I've heard enough ghost stories to know you're bluffing. Spill. Who sent you? Who's making these books? The figure's form shimmered, and for a moment its cloak parted, revealing a glimpse of something beneath. Skin too pale, too smooth, with veins that pulsed black. You seek a mastermind where there is none. The Liber Umberium chooses its own path. It chose you, boy. Its gaze fixed on Holden, who flinched. And it chose others. You're not the only ones marked. Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together fragments from their journey. Tommy Grayson's vacant eyes, Peter's death, the man in New York, Mr. Noir's warnings in Los Angeles. There's another owner, she said softly. Someone else bound to the books. Who is it? The figure's laugh grew louder, echoing unnaturally. You'll meet them soon enough. But first, a taste of what waits beyond the door. The fog surged, coalescing into shapes. Tall, eyeless figures with mouths that gaped too wide, their limbs jerking like marionettes. They drifted toward the trio, their whispers now screams in an alien tongue. Marlowe fired, the bullets passing through them like smoke, but Miss Marple splashed holy water from the vial Father O'Malley had given them. The figures recoiled, hissing, their forms dissolving into the fog. Move, Marlowe shouted, grabbing Holden's arm and pulling him toward the grave. We finish this now. Miss Marple knelt beside the coffin, spreading Wren's notes and arranging the ritual components. The silver dagger, Peter's hair, the 3 books from Holden's bag, and the grave. The cloaked figure watched, unmoving, as if savoring their desperation. She began the incantation, her voice steady despite the chaos, the Latin words from Wren's journal rolling off her tongue like a prayer. The books pulsed brighter, their covers writhing, and the ground shook harder. Holden clutched his head, the whispers now a roar inside his skull. It's fighting back, he yelled. It doesn't want us to stop. Keep going, Marlowe barked, standing guard with his gun, though it was useless against the shadows regrouping in the fog. As Miss Marple chanted, the air grew colder, the fog thickening until they could barely see each other. The cloaked figure raised its book, chanting in a language that twisted the air, and the eyeless shapes returned, stronger now, their claws reaching. One slashed at Marlowe, tearing his coat but missing his flesh. He stumbled back, cursing, and fired again, the sound swallowed by the fog. Holden dropped to his knees, the books in his hands burning hot. I can't hold them. He gasped, his voice breaking. They're trying to open. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to him, her chant unbroken. You are stronger than it, Mr. Caulfield. Fight it. But Holden's resolve wavered, his mind flooded with images. His sister Phoebe alone in a fog-choked park, the man from New York grinning with too many teeth, the promise of power if he'd just turned the page. He shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I don't want this, he whispered, but his fingers twitched toward the book's cover. Marlowe saw it and grabbed his shoulder, shaking him hard. Don't you dare, kid! You open that, we're all done for! The cloaked figure stepped closer, its voice a seductive purr. Let him choose, detective. The boy's heart is weak. He's already theirs. Miss Marple reached the final lines of the incantation, her voice rising. The books glowed blindingly and the grave began to collapse, the earth swallowing Crow's coffin. The eyeless figures screamed, their forms unraveling, but the cloaked figure stood firm, its book still open. It's not enough, it roared. You need the 4th owner. The ritual faltered, the books dimming. Miss Marple's heart sank. The fourth owner, she murmured, realization dawning. Mrs. Grayson, she turned to Marlowe. We must get to her, now. They fled the churchyard, the fog chasing them, the cloaked figure's laughter echoing behind. The Grayson house was a beacon in the mist, its windows flickering with an unnatural light. Inside, Mrs. Grayson stood in the parlor, another Liber Umberium in her hands, her eyes blank, her lips moving in a chant that matched the figures. Mrs. Grayson, Miss Marple called, but the woman didn't respond. Tommy sat nearby, his own chant growing louder, their voices blending into a cacophony that shook the walls. Marlowe aimed his gun, but Miss Marple stopped him. She's not herself. The book has her. Holden clutched his bag, his voice desperate. What do we do? If she's the fourth, we're screwed. Miss Marple's mind raced, her calm facade hiding a storm of fear. We take her book. We complete the ritual here. But as they moved toward her, the walls groaned and the fog seeped inside, forming new shapes, human-like but wrong, their faces familiar yet twisted. One resembled Peter Grayson, his neck still bearing the claw mark. Another looked like Marlowe's old partner, Johnny, his eyes empty. The third was Raymond, Miss Marple's nephew, smiling cruelly. You can't win, Raymond's voice hissed, though it wasn't him. The door stays open, Marlowe fired, the bullet passing through the specter. We need to move faster, Marple. She nodded, grabbing Mrs. Grayson's book, but it burned her hands, forcing her to drop it. The chants grew louder, the room darkening, and Holden screamed, the books in his bag glowing again, pulling at him. I can't stop it, he cried, falling to his knees. Miss Marple seized the silver dagger, slashing her palm and letting blood drip onto the books. By blood it was sealed, by blood it will end, she shouted, resuming the incantation. The room shook, the specters howling, but Mrs. Grayson's eyes cleared for a moment. Jane, help me, she whispered. The fog surged, the cloaked figure appearing in the doorway, its book blazing. You're out of time, it said, raising a hand. A scream tore through the house, not human but something vast and ancient, and the floor cracked beneath them, a void yawning wide. The Grayson house groaned like a living thing, its walls splintering as the void beneath the floor pulsed with an unnatural darkness. Miss Jane Marple stood firm, her bloodied hand gripping the silver dagger, the incantation from Professor Wren's note still ringing in her ears. The Liber Umberium books, 4 now including Mrs. Grayson's and the one from Elias Crow's grave, glowed with a sickly light, their pages fluttering as if caught in an unseen wind. Philip Marlowe shielded Holden Caulfield, his revolver, useless against the spectral figures circling them. Peter Grayson, Marlowe's old partner Johnny, and Miss Marple's nephew Raymond, their faces twisted into mocking parodies of life. The cloaked figure loomed in the doorway, its own book blazing, its voice a chorus of malice. You cannot stop it, it intoned, raising a hand that shimmered with black veins. The old ones claim what is theirs. Holden clutched his bag, the 2 books inside burning against his chest. It's gonna swallow us, he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. We can't fight this. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her mind racing through every detail, the whispers, the symbols, the blood curse. We can, Mr. Caulfield, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. But we must know the whole truth. Mrs. Grayson, what have you done? Mrs. Grayson, still clutching her copy of the Liber Umberium, swayed as if caught in a trance, her eyes flickering between clarity and emptiness. I didn't mean to, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling void. It came to me after Tommy disappeared. A man brought it, said it would bring him back. Marlowe's gun wavered, his gaze snapping to her. What man? Spill it, lady, or we're all dead. She trembled, tears streaming down her face. He was old, but not old. His eyes were wrong, like glass. He said the book would save Tommy, that I just had to read it, to call him back from the woods. I did. And Tommy came back, but he wasn't my boy, not anymore. Miss Marple's heart sank. The man in New York, she said, glancing at Holden. The one who gave you the book. Was he the same? Holden nodded, his face pale. Yeah, glassy eyes, creepy smile. Said the book was meant for me. The cloaked figure laughed, a sound that rattled the windows. You see? The Liber Umberium weaves its own web. You are all threads, caught and bound. Marlowe stepped toward Mrs. Grayson, his voice low and dangerous. You read it, didn't you? You opened the door. I had to, she cried, clutching the book tighter. It promised me Tommy, but it lied. It took Peter too, and now it, once more. The void pulsed, the specters closing in, their claws grazing the air. Miss Marple resumed the incantation, her voice steady despite the blood dripping from her palm onto the books. By blood it was sealed, by blood it will end, she intoned, placing Peter's lock of hair on the pile. The books shuddered, their glow faltering, but the void grew wider, the air thick with the stench of decay. It's not working, Holden yelled, his hands shaking as he fought the urge to open his books. The whispers in his head were deafening now, promising power, safety. Phoebe's laughter if he'd just give in. Marlowe grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. Don't listen, kid. It's playing you. Miss Marple's mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. Mrs. Grayson, she said urgently, did the man tell you anything else? A name, a purpose? She sobbed, her voice breaking. He called himself the scribe, said he serves the old ones, that they chose St. Mary Mead because of Crow's failure. The books are his work, copies to spread the door wider. The scribe, Miss Marple repeated, her eyes narrowing. Then he's the key. We must find him to stop this. The cloaked figure's laughter grew sharper. The scribe is beyond you. He is their voice, their hand. You hold his creations, but you cannot unmake them. Marlowe spun, firing at the figure, the bullet passing through it like mist. Enough talk, he snapped. Marple, finish the damn ritual. She nodded, her voice rising over the chaos, but the specters lunged, their claws slashing. One caught Marlowe's arm, drawing, blood, and he cursed, stumbling back. Holden screamed as Peter's specter reached for him, its face twisting into a grotesque smile. Miss Marple splashed holy water, driving them back, but the void was growing, the floor cracking further. We need her book, Miss Marple shouted, pointing to Mrs. Grayson. It's tied to her. Marlowe lunged for Mrs. Grayson, wresting the book from her grasp. She fought like a woman possessed, her nails raking his face, but he pried it free, tossing it to Miss Marple. She added it to the pile, her blood smearing the covers, and resumed the incantation, her voice a beacon in the storm. The books blazed, their pages burning without flame, and the void shuddered, shrinking slightly. The specters howled, their forms fraying, but the cloaked figure raised its book higher, its chant drowning out Miss Marple's. The air split, a crack of light revealing a glimpse of something vast, tentacled, eyeless, endless, reaching through. We're losing it, Marlowe yelled, holding off a specter with the dagger. Holden's eyes were wild, his hands hovering over his books. I can stop it, he whispered, his voice trembling. It's telling me how. I just have to open it. No, Miss Marple snapped, her voice cutting through his haze. You are not theirs, Holden, you are stronger than this. But the temptation was strong, the whispers promising an end to the fear. Holden's fingers brushed the cover and the room shook harder, the void surging. Marlowe tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Fratello, stay with us, kid, he growled. We need you. Miss Marple reached the final lines of the incantation, her blood soaking the books, the lock of hair igniting in a flash of white light. The void snapped shut, the specters vanishing with a final scream. But the cloaked figure remained, its book still glowing. You've delayed the inevitable, it said, its voice now singular, human-like. The scribe has more books, more doors. Find him or this world falls. It vanished, leaving the house silent, the fog outside thinning. The books lay inert, their glow gone, but Mrs. Grayson collapsed, sobbing. Tommy stared blankly, his chant silenced. Miss Marple knelt beside her, her voice gentle. "We'll find the scribe, Mrs. Grayson, for you, for Tommy." Marlowe helped Holden up, his face grim. "We got a name now. This scribe guy's our target." Holden nodded, his hand shaking. "But where do we even start?" Miss Marple stood, tucking the dagger into her handbag. "Back to the beginning. The bookstore in New York. That's where the scribe found you, Mr. Caulfield. That's where we'll find him." As they left the house, the fog parted, revealing St. Mary Mead's familiar streets. But the village felt different, as if the shadows lingered, waiting. In the distance, a figure watched, its glassy eyes glinting in the dawn light, a new Liber Umberium in its hands. The train from St. Mary Mead to New York was a steel cocoon rattling through the night, carrying Miss Jane Marple, Philip Marlowe, and Holden Caulfield toward their final confrontation. The Liber Umberium, books for now, their covers scorched from the ritual in the Grayson house, sat in Holden's bag, silent but heavy with menace. The air in the carriage was thick with the smell of cigarette smoke and tension, the trio's faces etched with exhaustion and resolve. The scribe, the enigmatic figure behind the books, was their target, and the bookstore in New York, where Holden first encountered the Liber Umberium, was their only lead. Miss Marple's knitting needles lay idle in her lap, her sharp eyes fixed on the dark window where her reflection mingled with the night beyond. "We must be cautious," she said softly. "The scribe is no ordinary man. He serves the old ones, and he'll protect his work at all costs." Marlowe stubbed out his cigarette, his jaw tight. "I've dealt with plenty of lowlifes who think they're untouchable. This guy's just another punk with a gimmick. We find him, we end him." Holden's hands trembled, the bag on his lap a constant reminder of the whispers that still lingered in his mind. What if we can't? What if he's not human? Those things in St. Mary Mead, they weren't just shadows. They were real. Miss Marple's gaze softened, though her voice was firm. "They are real, Mr. Caulfield, but so are we. We've faced them before and survived. We'll do it again." The train screeched into Penn Station, and the city greeted them with its familiar chaos, neon lights, honking cabs, and a pulse that never slowed. But beneath it, the air carried a chill, a whisper of something ancient watching from the shadows. The bookstore was a hole in the wall in Greenwich Village, its sign barely legible, Arcane Tomes. The windows were grimy, the door creaking as Marlowe pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint stench of decay. Shelves sagged under the weight of ancient books, their spines cracked and faded. The counter was empty, but a faint light flickered from a back room accompanied by a low rhythmic chanting. "Stay sharp," Marlowe whispered, his revolver drawn as he led the way. Miss Marple clutched her handbag, the silver dagger and holy, water inside while Holden gripped his bag, the books pulsing faintly. The chanting grew louder as they approached the back room, the words in a tongue that twisted the air, making their skin crawl. They stepped through a beaded curtain into a small chamber lit by candles. At its center stood a man, tall, gaunt, with glassy eyes that gleamed like polished stone. The scribe. He held a fifth Liber Umberium, its pages open, glowing with a sickly green light. Around him, symbols were carved into the floor, matching those from Crow's grave. "You've come," the scribe said, his voice smooth but laced with malice. "I knew the books would bring you back." Marlowe aimed his gun. "Game's over, pal. Drop the book and step away." The scribe's lips curled into a smile, too wide, too sharp. "You think you can stop this? The old ones are awake. The door is wide open." Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice calm but unyielding. "We've closed it before and we'll do it again. Tell us how to destroy the books, or we'll find a way ourselves." The scribe laughed, a sound that shook the room. "Destroy them? They are eternal, bound to their owners. You, boy." He pointed at Holden. "You're theirs now. And you, detective, your anger feeds them. Even you, old woman, your curiosity is their fuel." Holden's hand shook, the books in his bag burning hot. "I'm not theirs," he shouted. But the whispers surged in his mind, promising power, freedom, an end to his pain. Marlowe grabbed his arm. "Don't listen, kid, he's playing you." "Miss." Marple opened her handbag, pulling out Wren's notes and the ritual components. "We have everything we need," she said, spreading the books on the floor, adding Peter's lock of hair and a vial of her own blood. "We end this now." The scribe's eyes narrowed. "You're fools. The ritual demands a life. Who will pay it?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "If it must be, I will." "No," Holden cried, stepping forward. "I started this. It's my fault. I'll do it." Marlowe's voice was sharp. "Nobody's dying today. We're trying Wren's way first." Miss Marple began the incantation, her voice rising over the scribe's chant. The books glowed brighter, their pages fluttering wildly, and the symbols on the floor pulsed with light. The air grew heavy, the candles flickering as shadows coalesced into familiar forms. Peter, Johnny, Raymond, their faces twisted with hunger. Marlowe fired at the specters, the bullets passing through, while Holden splashed holy water, driving them back. Miss Marple's chant grew louder, her blood dripping onto the books, igniting them in a flash of white light. The scribe screamed, his book blazing, and the room shook, shelves collapsing, books tumbling to the floor. "You can't," he roared, lunging for Miss Marple. Marlowe tackled him, pinning him to the ground, but the scribe's strength was unnatural, his hands clawing at Marlowe's throat. Holden dropped his bag, grabbing the silver dagger and plunging it into the scribe's book. The blade sank deep, and a scream, not human but vast and ancient, tore through the room. The scribe's form shimmered, his glassy eyes dimming, and he collapsed, his body dissolving into ash. The books burned without flame, their pages crumbling to dust. The specters vanished, the symbols faded, and the air cleared, leaving only silence. The void that had threatened to swallow them was gone. Holden sank to his knees, trembling. "Is it over?" Miss Marple nodded, her face pale but composed. "For now, the door is closed." Marlowe stood, wiping blood from his face. "And the scribe?" "Gone," she said. "But others may follow. The old ones are patient." They left the bookstore as dawn broke, the city stirring to life. Miss Marple suggested tea at a nearby diner, and they sat in a booth, the weight of their ordeal settling over them. "What now?" Holden asked, his voice small. "You go home, Mr. Caulfield," Miss Marple said gently. "Live your life. You're free of the book." He nodded, but his eyes were haunted. "What if it comes back?" "Then we'll face it," Marlowe said, lighting a cigarette. "Together," Miss Marple smiled faintly. "Indeed, but for now we part ways. St. Mary Mead awaits me, and I suspect you both have your own paths." They said their goodbyes outside, the city's noise a stark contrast to the silence of their shared nightmare. Holden headed for Central Park, his red cap a splash of color in the gray dawn. Marlowe tipped his hat to Miss Marple, a rare smile breaking through. "You're one hell of a dame, Marple. And you, Mr. Marlowe, are a most capable detective," she replied, turning toward her train. As she boarded, a chill ran through her. In her handbag, unnoticed, a single page from the Liber Umberium lay folded, its script faintly glowing. The door was closed, but not locked.